I'm Laurie Cardoza-Moore, and this is Focus on Israel.
What disinformation is and how it has damaged Israel and the Jewish people? Well, on our program today, you'll learn the truth about this insidious and secretive attack. Hello, and welcome to Focus on Israel. I'm Laurie Cardoza-Moore, president and founder of Proclaiming Justice to the Nations, a nonprofit organization dedicated to educating and sharing the message of Christian biblical responsibility to the people and land of Israel against the rise of global genocidal anti-Semitism. Today, the media is rampant with many lies about Israel in the form of propaganda and disinformation. Many of us have been affected by disinformation and may not even realize what it is and how much it impacts us. When a nation or political entity espouses a lie, we label this propaganda and is usually recognizable. But disinformation is a different and much more insidious form of political deception. Disinformation is a lie spread not by the liar, but by another source, by a legitimate source that many believe in. This makes it not only harder to discern, but can give it an often endless life of its own. The lie thus becomes a rewritten history. One of the greatest disinformation campaigns against Israel is labeling the Jewish people and Israeli military in Judea and Samaria as occupiers. In 1967, when Israel was attacked by Arab armies from this area, Israel won back this vital part of their ancient homeland. According to international law, when you are attacked and when you don't give the land back to your attackers. As Menachem Begin once stated, these are not occupied territories, they are liberated territories. Many international agreements, including the British Mandate and the San Remo Resolution, clearly specify this land to be a part of Israel. Yet the world's media continues to call Israel occupiers. One of the longest standing and most heinous disinformation campaigns against the Jewish people originated in Tsarist Russia. The Protocols of the Elders of Zion was released onto the world in 1917 and is still used by anti-Semites to spread hatred of the Jewish people. The award-winning film Disinformation, The Secret Strategy to Destroy the West, gives a historical background to Russian disinformation and the disturbing creation of the protocols.
Since World War II, disinformation has been the Kremlin's most effective secret weapon in its war on the West. Stalin turned the practice into a science deeply rooted in Russia's soil and history. Born in the 18th century, disinformation was the fruit of the passionate love affair between Catherine the Great and Prince Potemkin, her principal political and military advisor. In 1787, Potemkin took the Empress on a tour of the Crimea, which he had been instrumental in annexing from the Turks. In order to impress her, Potemkin had arranged for fake villages to be erected along the route that Catherine would take. Down through the ages, everyone who has sat on the Kremlin throne has utilized disinformation to transform his country into a monument to himself. Controlling all expressions of religion was central to that ambition. Russia's manipulation and persecution of religion came to an apex with the creation of the Protocols of the Elders of Zion, perhaps the most resilient piece of disinformation ever compiled.
This book purports to be the words of psychopathic Jewish world leaders that are conspiring to enslave the entire world.
The Tsarists, who were anti-Semites to a fault, engineered the fabrication of a document they called the Protocols of the Elders of Zion for the purpose of sustaining one of the grounds for hating the Jews and engaging in pogroms against them, namely that they ran the world. And it is an extraordinary piece of work, not only because of the use that the Tsarists and those in Russia made of it, but the application of it to this very day by people who continue to find it useful for discrediting or undermining or justifying assaults against the Jews.
Judaism gave us the rule of law, kind of comes out of the Sinai. And it's one of the reasons I think that anti-Semitism is always one of the first refuges of the scoundrels. They need to undermine that idea that the law is above the ruler. And one way they do that is to go after Jews and Judaism.
I'm just describing as a student of Soviet ideology. I know what I'm talking about. It started under Stalin. It got enhanced under Nikita Khrushchev. And obviously, anti-Zionism became a fundamental underpinning of the Soviet ideology.
Soon after Lenin died in 1924, Stalin revived the protocols and made it the basis for his anti-Semitic purges. Over 7 million Russians were framed as Zionist spies and executed at Stalin's order. In Germany, Hitler used the protocols to blame the Jews for all of the disasters that had befallen the country. The Nazis translated the protocols into many new languages and flooded the world with them to create the impression of a Jewish conspiracy aimed at world domination, thus justifying the persecution of Jews as a matter of self-defense.
If you read some of the documents of the Nazis and newspapers of the Nazis and so on, you will see that they considered the protocols, Hitler himself considered protocols to be a historical evidence for their anti-Semitic fantasies.
The use of disinformation to promote anti-Semitism did not, however, end with the defeat of Nazi Germany. In the late 1960s, KGB chief Yuri Andropov gave the protocols a new life in the Middle East.
The Soviet Union's covert use of disinformation has affected our country and the world in so many harmful ways, many we are not even aware of. This film is based on the eyewitness account of Lieutenant General Ion Pachepa, the highest-ranking Soviet bloc intelligence officer to ever defect. One deadly aspect we'll expose in this next part of the film deals with how the Soviet Union used disinformation to create the terrorism we see coming from the Middle East today. The effect on Israel and the Jewish people has been devastating and far-reaching.
.630 AD, the political religion of Islam begins its cancerous spread across the Middle East. Within 100 years, the Muslims' bloody conquest and subjugation of others through invasion and war reaches the very heart of France. Beaten back at the Battle of Tours, the cancer would resurge once more as the Ottoman Empire. With the First World War, dreams of world domination are lost again as Islam's empire is crushed and the Muslim world stagnates in a medieval state. Even though multiple countries are carved from the Ottoman Empire and given into the hands of Muslim rulers, hatred for the West seethes. The Middle East becomes a petri dish of ancient hatred for Jews and the reconstituted Jewish state. In the late 1960s, the Soviet Union finds an ally and thus begins an exploitation that reverberates to this day in one of the greatest campaigns of disinformation, an insidious formula to undermine and destroy Western civilization, a strategy still at work today.
Disinformation has a very long-term strategic objective.
An influence campaign to influence American attitudes, to influence public opinion.
Disinformation appears to come from a trusted source.
A lie by the government.
Disinformation flows from the delusion that you can change the world. Very sinister.
The disinformation has been a
going on for years and years.
If you can get the New York Times to release your misinformation, it becomes disinformation.
It's deceptive, it's disgusting, it's despicable, and it's part of their political program.
It's part of an overall strategy.
We see disinformation as a way to sidestep us, particularly in the intelligence world.
Disinformation has been part of the art of war going back to ancient times.
Disinformation is pervasive. It's pervasive in our society and in our culture.
It's a form of psychological warfare.
In June of 1967, the fast and decisive Six-Day War in the Middle East came to an abrupt end. Victorious Israeli forces had taken control of the Sinai Peninsula and the Gaza Strip from Egypt, the West Bank and East Jerusalem from Jordan, and the Golan Heights from Syria. The defeat of the Soviet-backed countries of Egypt and Syria would have repercussions for many years to come. On the December 1968 cover of Time magazine, Yasser Arafat's face was seen by the world for the first time. Arafat was a product of the Kremlin's science of disinformation, and he ultimately became an expert in manipulating this invisible weapon. As a first step, the KGB destroyed the official records of Arafat's birth in Egypt, replacing them with fictitious documents that he had been born in Jerusalem.
It amazed me at what great lengths the KGB took to transform an Egyptian-born Marxist into the Palestinian-born terrorist, Yasser Arafat. It took the KGB many years to endow Arafat with a credible birth certificate and other identity documents, to build him a new past and to train him at the KGB Special Operations Training School east of Moscow. The KGB gave Arafat an ideology and an ideological image. The Soviet disinformation machinery portrayed Arafat as a rabid anti-Zionist, an image that was not at all difficult.
Oleg Gordievsky, a former KGB officer who defected to Britain, revealed that in the 70s, the KGB had secretly brought Arafat's terrorists into the Soviet Union to be trained. The KGB Disinformation Department tasked Arafat to create and head a terrorist group named Fatah, and in the aftermath of the Six-Day War, it catapulted him up as chairman of the PLO. The Matrokin archive also details Arafat's close collaboration with the KGB. In 1978, Soviet leader Leonid Brezhnev and his KGB chairman Yuri Andropov started a disinformation plot. The goal? Get the United States to establish diplomatic relations with Arafat. The idea was simple: have Arafat pretend to transform the terrorist PLO into a government in exile that was willing to renounce terrorism. Brezhnev and Andropov believed that newly elected President Jimmy Carter would swallow the bait. In 1994, Arafat was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. Yet in 2002 alone, there were over 13,000 incidents of terrorism against Israelis committed by Arafat's PLO. 6 months later, the number of Israeli civilians killed by Arafat's martyrs exceeded 700. Few people have noticed that Mahmoud Abbas, who took Arafat's place, was educated in the former Soviet Union. Abbas graduated from Patrice Lumumba University in Moscow, a KGB-controlled school whose secret task was to create a new generation of foreigners dedicated to promoting the Kremlin's interests. In 1972, Lieutenant General Ion Mihai Pacepa was named the Deputy Chief of the Foreign Intelligence Service for Romania. Within a short time, he had absolute power over all the top organizations dealing with the West.
As I was now in the inner sanctum of the Soviet bloc intelligence community, I was sent to Moscow to meet with Yuri Andropov, the chairman of the Soviet KGB. He told me about the next step in his Middle East disinformation strategy.
Yuri Andropov had begun his unprecedented 15 years as KGB chairman just a few months before the 1967 Six-Day War. Israel soundly defeated the Soviet Union's most important allies in the Arab world, Egypt and Syria. In those days, both were in effect being run by Soviet advisors. As the new KGB chairman, Andropov decided to repair the Kremlin's prestige by humiliating Israel. His master plan was to revive anti-Semitism, to regenerate international terrorism against the United States and Israel. Hundreds of undercover agents infiltrated the Islamic target countries, and by 1978, the Soviet bloc intelligence community had sent some 4,000 such agents. The KGB planted the seed by distributing an Arabic translation of the Protocols of the Elders of Zion, along with documentary material proving that the United States was a Zionist country whose aim was to start a new crusade on the Islamic world. Thousands of copies were disseminated throughout the Middle East.
This was certainly one of the greatest disinformation campaigns of modern times.
Kids in many Middle Eastern countries, Arab countries, read the protocols. The textbooks have references to the protocols as if this is the real, reliable documents.
America is the great Satan, and Israel is the little Satan. That's what every leftist believes, and that's what every Islamist believes. And that would be what the KGB believed. So, get the Jews.
The terrorist war came into action at the end of 1968, when the KGB transformed airplane hijacking into an instrument of terror. Before 1969 came to an end, Palestinian terrorists, trained by the KGB, had hijacked their first El Al plane and landed it in Algeria. The hijacking had been planned and coordinated by the KGB, but to conceal his hand and drop off had the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, a KGB front group, take credit for the hijacking. During the next 2 years, various KGB-trained Palestinian terrorists took credit for hijacking 13 Israeli and Western planes. All these hijackings were masterminded by the KGB.
The Soviet Union was very involved with Arab nationalists, basically from the World War II period on, if not before. In the latter part of its lifespan, the Soviet Union began developing, and I think very aggressively engaged in supporting, people who weren't so much Arab nationalists as they were Islamists or jihadists, but in some degree were the sort of follow-on, the successors to the Arab nationalists. They trained terrorists. They helped them become much more formidable in terms of threat. And to varying degrees, they enabled or certainly facilitated their association with and interoperations in some cases with terrorists that the Soviets were also involved with in other parts of the world.
The political success of hijacking Israeli airplanes prompted the KGB to expand into organizing public executions and attacks on Jews in airports, train stations, and other public places. The KGB threw millions of dollars and thousands of people into Andropov's disinformation and terror war.
Here's the thing. The Islamists have been to school, and particularly the Palestinians, with the KGB and the communists during the Cold War. What the Islamists, the Muslim Brotherhood in particular, didn't learn from the KGB, they've learned from the American and European left.
Andropov preached to me that in today's world, when nuclear arms have made military force obsolete, terrorism should become our main weapon against American Zionism. He looked at the Muslim world as a waiting petri dish in which we could nurture a strain of hate America, grown from the bacterium of Marxist-Leninist thought. Their illiterate, oppressed mouths could easily be whipped up to a fever pitch. We had only to keep repeating over and over that the United States was a war-mongering Zionist country, anxious to take over the world.
Anti-American, anti-Zion, they're opposite Zionism. They're opposite sides of the same coin. And if it's easier to excite someone with anti-Zionism, knowing that it will also produce anti-Americanism, that is a classic invitation to disinformation specialists.
If you read Khomeini's biography carefully, you'll see that he was trained both by Nazis and by Soviet communists on how to organize his movement. So the whole structure of the cadres inside the Khomeini movement came straight from Moscow.
Well, I've seen intel reports over the years that the Russians were working with the Palestinian terrorist organizations, not just Hamas, but the PLO and others.
And the PLO trained in the Soviet Union. It's the least secret fact in the modern world. And the alliance between radical Muslims and the world communist organizations is very intimate and has been there all along. Nothing new. And why not? They have a common view of the kind of society and government they want to have, totalitarian, and they have a common enemy, us.
What's quite striking as we flash forward to today is the ways in which one of their clients, the Muslim Brotherhood, has emulated and frankly improved upon, is targeting all of the civil society institutions in this country and our government for the purposes of subverting us and ultimately achieving their victory.
If you look at the Palestinians in Gaza and the West Bank, their heroes are Nazis. Their heroes are people who kill people because they're Jews, not because of anything they did, just because they're Jews. Their children are taught to hate Jews and want to kill them.
The cumulative effect of distributing millions of Arabic translations of the protocols in Arabic over 20+ years throughout the Islamic world may be self-evident. With deadly secrecy, the Kremlin began arming the anti-American Arab terrorists, just as they had done in Andropov's day. On July 12, 2006, militants of Hezbollah, armed by Putin's Russia, launched a powerful rocket attack against Israel. Most of the Hezbollah weapons cases captured by the Israeli military forces during that offensive were marked Customer, Ministry of Defense of Syria, Supplier, KBP, Tula, Russia. Hezbollah has also been recently armed with the Russian-designed FAR-5 rockets, Zelzal-1 rockets, Scud missiles, as well as Russian anti-tank missiles. Putin also quietly reinstituted sales of weapons to Iran and engaged Russia in the construction of a 1,000-megawatt nuclear reactor at Bushehr. The uranium conversion facility is capable of producing fissile material for nuclear weapons. Hundreds of Russian technicians also started helping the government of Iran to develop the Shahab missile system, which can carry a nuclear or germ warhead to anywhere in the Middle East and Europe.
The big dog in the Persian Gulf region right now, because they are developing a nuclear weapon, is Iran. So if they could establish that kind of influence and the Iranians would essentially dominate the Persian Gulf region, the Russians corner the market on gas and oil.
Russia sees helping Iran and working with Iran, and it did with Syria as well, as a very good way to undermine American influence in the Middle East.
Clearly, Iran is one of Mr. Putin's greatest allies. They're a great trading partner with him. Has built their nuclear power plants and probably has supplied them with a lot of other technology.
We have to look realistically at the potential of a nuclear-armed Iran as being a huge threat, not only to America, but to global stability.
Iran's current president, Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, had already announced that nothing could stop his country from building nuclear weapons, and he stated that Israel was a disgraceful stain on the Islamic world that would be eliminated. During World War II, thousands of Americans died to eradicate Nazism and its anti-Semitic terrorism. Now we're facing Islamofascism and nuclear anti-Semitic terrorism.
In 2006, a former KGB officer, Alexander Litvinenko, defected to Great Britain and revealed some earth-shattering secrets to the British Foreign Intelligence Service. One of those secrets which became public was that the current leader of Al-Qaeda was trained in 1997 by the KGB in Dagestan.
Evidence has also begun to reveal that the Kremlin was involved in igniting and then stealing the 2011 Islamic revolutions, called the Arab Spring. In Egypt, the most pro-American Islamic country, anti-government demonstrations started on January 25, 2011. Some of the young people there who were allegedly demanding democracy could be seen burning the flag of the very country that symbolizes democracy for most of the world.
So everything is really unpredictable today in the Middle East. Muslim Brotherhood in Cairo, you can see quite a lot of disinformation going on about them in the American press, that they're not as bad as we thought they were, etc. It's ridiculous. And I can't think of a bigger danger for the Middle East than the rise of the Muslim Brotherhood. These are people who hate us and want Sharia law to be applied everywhere. And what they've done in the 2 or 3 towns that they occupied in Mali is cut hands off to punish people.
Today, a major source of disinformation is spread through conspiracy theories. Many governments in the Mideast take these theories as fact, much like the protocols of Zion are. The most incendiary still circulating revolve around 9/11, with such fabrications that the CIA or Mossad were behind the attacks, and that no Jews died in the Twin Towers that day.
People like conspiracy theories. It's kind of a substitute for God. That is, it puts order into the world. There's not random chaos and catastrophe. Everything is ordered because there's a conspiracy behind it. So people are prone, they feel comfortable with conspiracy theories.
Well, that's our show for today, and I want to thank you for watching. We just showed a portion of this award-winning and important film. I highly suggest you obtain a copy of Disinformation, as there is so much more to learn about this insidious form of political deception. I want to remind you once again, the time to stand up is now. You can make a difference, and gaining critical knowledge is the first step. Get involved and support pro-Israel organizations such as PJTN. Visit our website, sign up to receive free action alerts, and order our films to share with others. God bless you, and thank you for all you do on behalf of our Jewish brethren and all Israel. We'll see you next time on Focus on Israel.
To support this program, send your tax-deductible gift to Proclaiming Justice to the Nations, P.O. Box 682711, Franklin, Tennessee 37068. You can also support PJTN online. Visit pjtn.org or call 1-877-873-9020.
Anti-Semitism has reached epic proportions, and Israel is now surrounded by nations who seek its destruction. For Israel to lose just one battle would mean losing everything. As Christians, it is our biblical responsibility to stand with our Jewish brethren and Israel. PJTN needs your help to reach more Christians with this urgent message. Please visit our website to become a member today and order our award-winning documentaries. You must decide that you won't be silent. Sign up now at pjtn.org. God bless you, and thank you for your support and prayers.